more time.
One more time. Jose, you are not alone. Because if not us, who and if not now, when? Jose, presenting to you, Jose Antonio Vargas.
I wrote a speech. I can't stand up and read it, so I'm going to sit.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah. Whatever you want to do.
I'm here to audition for Filipino Idol.
Oh, you go ahead and sing.
I'm about to sing Alea Salonga song. I'm kidding. So thank you. Maraming salamat for inviting me here today. There are three people that I really have to recognize. There are two people that I really want to recognize right off the bat. One of them, she just spoke. Tita Bing, can you stand up again? Bing Brannigan, there she is. So Tita Bing has known me for more than 10 years. She met me when I arrived at the Washington Post in 2004. I was the only Filipino reporter, I think, in all of Washington, D.C. that was working for a mainstream news organization. She was actually one of the first people to tell me that I've won this thing called the Pulitzer. And she just like put a mic in front of me. And she was one of the first people that I called. I called her on the phone and I told her, Tita Bing, I'm about to come out for the second time in my life. The first time was the whole gay thing. And then 12 years later, I called Tita Bing and I said, Tita Bing, I'm about to come out as TNT. She had no idea that I was documenting. And I told her that this time of hiding and hiding, which is what TNT is, it's over. And Tita Bing being Tita Bing, she's like, how can I help you? First thing she said, how can I help you? The other person I have to thank is my Uncle Conrad Salinas. Uncle, can you stand up? It's my uncle. My uncle was born in Iba, Zambales, in the Philippines. Uncle Conrad, you know, his parents, my Lola and my Lola, thought that he should be a farmer or a fisherman. But he wanted something more for himself and his family. So he found his way to the naval base in Olongapo City. And he joined the U.S. Navy and arrived in the United States in 1977. Then 4 years later, in 1981, the year that I was born, he became an American citizen. For about 30 years, as he petitioned his parents and 7 siblings to come to the U.S., which is how all of us, most of us, got to this country, right? He worked and served in the U.S. Navy for 20 years and retired as a lieutenant. His retirement party was a really big deal for my whole family, especially my Lolo and my Lola. My Lolo treated him like his own son. And I know my grandfather passed away a few years ago, and I know how proud my grandfather is of him. And I'm just proud to say that I am proud of him. So, thank you for acknowledging me. And I finished the documentary called Documented that CNN aired in June. They're about to re-air it again in September. It premiered in the Philippines at the Cinemalaya Festival. I think it's probably going to be in theaters in the Philippines. My Uncle Conrad is in the film, and I actually think it's one of my favorite scenes in the film. As he puts on his uniform, his U.S. Navy uniform, I asked him, one of the filmmakers that I was working with asked him, Uncle Conrad, how do you define American? And Uncle Conrad says, define not by vocabulary meaning, this is his accent I'm using, but he says, who is really the Americans? You know, I would say it's supposed to be the people that are willing, who come here, willing to contribute, to do good for this country. Not because they were just born here, but because this is their home. That's how I define America. And what we've been doing in the past 3 years at Define American, through films, we're about to develop a couple of hopefully television shows, is just that. Is this question of how do you define American, but not through politics, As you all know, we're living in an incredibly polarized time in this country. But how do we use culture? How do we use culture and arts and media to change politics? To me, before I knew what a Democrat or a Republican was, I learned about America by watching television and movies. I learned what black and white is by watching The Cosby Show and Cheers. I learned that in America, you have white and you have black, and then if you're Filipino, where do you fit in? I don't know. I didn't know. And I think for a lot of us, for a lot of young Filipinos, that's one of the questions, right? And as somebody who's also gay, or what people would call bakla, I learned in the past 10, 15 years in this country that you cannot change the politics of an issue unless you change how people talk about the issue. 10 years ago, President Bush got reelected on the back of opposition to same-sex marriage. 10 years later, in 2014, same-sex marriage and LGBT rights are inevitable, right? The cultural shift, Ellen DeGeneres, Will and Grace, more gay people coming out, gay people being represented in pop culture and television and music and in movies, that changed before politics change. So we're using LGBT rights as a model to change how people think of immigrants, documented or undocumented. And for me, one of the things that has been challenging in the past 3 years is, from the beginning, when we called our campaign Define American, we were challenged about that name. I had some Filipinos here in the United States and back in the Philippines actually contact me and said, "Are you not proud of being Filipino? What is all this talk about being American? First of all, you're not American, because you're TNT. Second of all, what is all this talk about being American? Why don't you define Filipino?" So that's been in my head for the past 3 years. But for me, it's very important to embrace America because the history of this country is directly tied to the history of the Philippines. The fact that we have a right, Filipinos have a right to be in this country. People forget this, during the Spanish-American War, many Filipino soldiers died while fighting with the Americans against Spanish rule, only later to realize that the Americans wanted to colonialize them. People don't know that the Philippines was actually the first Iraq. We were the first occupied territory. People don't know that in many ways the Philippines was... Oh, sorry, I just saw a bar. Okay. People don't know that the Philippines was the first Iraq. People don't know that the Philippines, like Puerto Rico, was a U.S. territory. And you know what's shocking to me? How many Filipinos in America don't know the history of Philippines and the United States? That to me is what I find really shocking. We can talk about who's the Miss Universe contestant of the past 10 years, but we can't seem to know our own history about how we got here. And for me, it's not just changing American culture, it's changing Filipino culture. The Filipino culture, we are the third largest immigrant group in this country. The Mexicans, Chinese, and then us. There's about 4 million Filipinos in America. Those are just the legal, documented ones. I don't think they're even counting people like me. That's a lot of people. Yet, what as a people do we actually really have to show for it? And I'm not talking about ABS-CBN or the Philippine Inquirer. I'm talking about America as in the New York Times, CNN, Entertainment Tonight. I'm talking about America as America. Where is Filipino representation in that media? A couple of hours ago, I was flying here, and on Facebook, I put a question to the people who follow me. And I asked them to answer this question of, what is the Filipino identity in the United States? So I'm going to read you some answers that I got. Some pretty smart answers. Filipino identity in the U.S. means bamboo. Resilient in the howling of the wind. I love that. Filipino identity is skewed. Inaccurate stereotypes like eating dog are subservient, low in the general hierarchy, made fun of and dissed in the entertainment media world. Another definition, I can only speak to the Hapa experience, half white, half Filipino, that can be isolating when there is a certain amount of rejection or ostracism from both the Filipino community and the Caucasian community. Filipino identity, someone wrote, we are generationally divided. And in many cases, our second and third generation Pinoys lack a string of connection to their own roots. This is probably my favorite definition, this last one. Somebody wrote, Filipinos are viewed as Asians geographically, Hispanics culturally, Americans socially. That's what happened when you spend 400 years in a convent and 440 years in Hollywood. But we are hardworking and resilient. And then he quoted a poem by Carlos P. Romulo that read, I am a Filipino, inheritor of the glorious past, hostage to the uncertain future. So, that's why we're here. That's why you guys attended this conference, right? What is the Filipino identity? Not in the Philippines, but in America. What is the Filipino identity in America? Especially Filipinos who've been migrating to the United States before it was even called the United States of America. I don't know if people realize this. The first recorded presence of Filipinos in what is now the United States was October 1587. The first permanent settlement of Filipinos in the United States was in Louisiana in 1763. That's 13 years before Americans declared independence, saying that all men are created equal. You might have heard about a month ago that I got arrested in Texas, which was not planned. No one plans to be arrested, at least not me. And to go through the airport, as I will have to go through the airport tomorrow at the San Diego airport, I only carry 2 pieces of government ID. One is my Filipino passport that I got through JP Malonga from the Philippine Embassy in New York. But it doesn't have a visa. So I've been in this country since I was 12, I'm not allowed to leave this country. And the other thing that I carry with me is my pocketbook version of the Declaration of Independence. Because on page 9 of this book, when it said all men are created equal, I actually think they're also referring to me. And they're referring to all of us. So this conference apparently is called We Break the Dawn, Master Planning the Future. That's a big title for a convention. And that's really something big to live up to. That's a big challenge. I first heard about NaFFAA more than 3 years ago. I was introduced to a woman that I didn't know named Loida Nicolas Lewis. She and I met at the Harvard Club in New York, in Manhattan. When you go to the Harvard Club, there are 2 photos of African Americans in the dining hall. Barack Obama and her husband. Guess whose photos is bigger? Her husband's. So we're sitting there having lunch. I tell her everything. We get to the lobby. She called JT Malonga, who was in the Philippines at the time, and says, JT, this is a kid, he needs our help. So that was in April. The next month, I went to your NaFFAA conference in Las Vegas. And I'm grateful for about 50 or 60 people that we met with. My Uncle Conrad was there, my Lola was there. Because I wasn't about to do this publicly and not talk to my people. Not tell the leaders of NaFFAA what's about to happen. So I did. My friend Ben de Guzman was in that meeting. And to my surprise, we're a very culture of chismosos. No one said anything for 2.5 months. I told him what was happening. My Uncle Conrad felt a lot better about it because he was really scared. And then I outed myself in the New York Times. And in the beginning, I had the support of NaFFAA. A support, mind you, that I always wondered what else and what more could this organization do. To me, what happened with Haiyan last year was very interesting. Because people, as I'm sure everybody here felt, that was a moment when Filipinos in the United States and around the world really connected and got united, right? That was the time when my friends realized that I was Filipino. I got like, I don't know how many technical, hey, is your mom okay? I'm like, she's in Rosoma. We're talking about the science. But thank you for asking. Right? What was interesting about that time is that everybody wanted to help. They wanted to send clothes, they wanted to send money. They wanted to send canned goods. Everybody wanted to help.